My name is Audrey Myers. I'm a retired deacon out of the Kentucky Conference, now living in Georgia. I am also a member of the Parents Reconciling Group, and I had the pleasure of working with Emily Bagwell, who's our resource person from the Reconciling Ministries Network, who helped us with this Parent Support Group Toolkit. We started the process with her, gave her some information, and Emily just took off with it, and I think has put together a very, very good piece of work that if you're planning on starting a group, or if you are in a group and you need some more information, I think that it's a wonderful asset. And I don't know, did any of you download this the toolkit? Do any of you have it in front of you? A couple of you do. Okay, well, good. Well, we're going to go through it, some of the pages of it first. And then I know there are a couple people on the call with us today who can share with us how their groups, the reconciling groups, have worked, if they've had one in their neighborhood. And we'll save some time for questions and answers at the end if you have some that you'd like to ask. There are some really good resource people on this call with us today, so please ask your questions. And as we go through any questions you have, we'll try and watch the chat or raise your hand and we'll get to you. So I want to get started. It's called the Parent Support Group Toolkit. It was put together by Parents Reconciling Network, which is an extension of the Reconciling Ministry Network. And we put it together because we thought it would help you develop and lead a gathering of loved ones. I think for many of us who have LGBTQ plus children, or we needed parents to talk to, or allies. We needed other people to walk alongside of us and tell us that we were doing okay. And it was just great to have a support group along the way. And so we've put this together, and it's appropriate for queer and trans people, for parents, for grandchildren, for siblings, for sons, daughters, whomever might need some extra support as we go through this process. All right, Ophelia is we're going to share the screen, and we're going to put up a couple of pages, and we'll just talk through those just a little bit. And again, if you have any questions along the way, just let us know. Let's go to page 2. Here's the beginning of it, the wonderful artwork that's on the front of that. I love that artwork, as you can see. Let's go on to page 2. All right. How do you know what you need? What are the things that you should think about when you begin to think about starting a group? Well, number one, who's going to host? Is that going to be you? Is that going to be a group of people? Are you going to look for other people? I would suggest finding somebody else on your planning team. You know, it's hard to do something when you're singular out there, but find other people, like-minded people who might want to support a group. And then you have to think about, where are you going to meet? A church might be one place to meet. When we started our group in Kentucky, the minister of our church would not let us meet there. So we ended up meeting at homes because that was where we could. But you know, if your group is not a church group, if it's a school group, if it's it's a group that doesn't go to church, you may want to meet at a coffee shop. You may want to find a library. Find a place that's convenient for your group to meet. And then think about who's going to be in your group. It might all be church people. The group that we started in Kentucky happened to be all church group, all people from our church. But you know, you might have a school group. I think about my daughter, my granddaughter, my daughter, and she could really use a group. She has a child who's discerning whether or not they're trans or not. And she could really use some people. My daughter could really use some people to talk to. I wish she had a group, a school group, to talk to. Counselors at school are great, but they can only do so much. She needs other parents to talk to. And who's your group going to be for? Will it be for parents of parents of LGBTQ persons, or will it be allies? Will it be friends? Identify who's going to be in your group. And is your group going to meet is it going to be an ongoing group? Or is it going to be a specific group for just a short period of time? I already told you earlier that there's a group of us meeting just for 3 weeks. We're doing a book study on incompatible. Well, that's one way of meeting, but it's only a 3-week group. It has a beginning and it has an end. So on page 4, if you're following along, or you can look on the screen, this is great. Just find, or page 3, I'm sorry, page 3. I can't read my own writing. Ophelia, page 3. Thank you so much. And thank you to our host for this Zoom meeting. I appreciate what you've done. So again, find your location. That's really, really important, to find a location that fits your group. If it's not a church group, don't ask them to come to a church, because it's probably not going to work. Find out how long, tell people right up front, how long is your group going to meet? Is it going to be an ongoing group? Is it going to be monthly? Is it going to be a short 4-week Bible study? And then I think the time of your meeting is really important. I think at the most an hour and a half is all you can hold somebody's attention. And I have found that people are really, really, really busy. And sometimes they just want to get in and out. So at the most an hour and a half, sometimes preferably maybe just an hour. And don't forget, Zoom also works really well. If you can't get together in a place, together in a location, Zoom is also an option for many people. On page 4, as we go through this, and please, if you have any questions or anything, stop me and ask, if you don't mind. Is that a hand up that I see? Eric, you didn't have your hand up, did you? You're on mute. No, okay. All right, so some examples of meetings: get together. If you don't know one another, name tags are a great thing to use. Make sure everybody knows one another, and also start your meeting on time and end it on time. People's time, I'm always amazed. I think people's time is just really precious right now. I don't know how we've gotten so busy. I'm retired. I shouldn't be nearly as busy as I am right now, but time becomes very precious to me. So start and end your meeting on time, and expect people perhaps to stay after and talk, but that's okay. If they want to stay after and talk to one another, that's great. But just make sure you begin and end your meeting on time. Icebreaker. Emily has put in here some icebreaker ideas, and those are great ideas. I think you want your group to form some sort of a connection with one another. Some of the groups I've been in lately, we've been doing a real quick go around the room kind of thing, introducing ourselves, asking what's going on in your life. If it's a church group, a Christian group, you can always ask for prayers and concerns. The only thing you've got to be careful about is that people talk too long sometimes. So maybe you want to give them a specific question to answer, but you want that. I have found that in a group, if you begin to get to know one another, you can't just jump into a conversation generally. You need to get to know one another just a little bit before you can begin to work together. As a deacon, I was always taught that you had to eat and work together before you could ever learn to pray together real well. So I think that having that conversation, just getting to know one another at the very beginning of your meeting, pays off in the long run. There's some great icebreaker ideas there that Emily has put in here. Use them, because they will get the conversation flowing, particularly amongst people that don't know one another. Number 6, page 6. And this is one of the things I think that is as important as anything else I'm going to say to you today. Confidentiality is very important. I mean, I can't say that enough. Do not share any information that you do not have permission to share. And that includes things about your children, your grandchildren. If you don't have permission to share that information, don't do it. And certainly don't take anything out of that meeting, outside of that meeting. Anything that's said in that meeting is private. Unless you have permission, do not say anything at all. And I think that's so very important, because people want to feel like they can come into this group. It's a support group, and they can say what they're thinking or feeling and feel safe. And that's really what you want for people to do. You want them to feel safe. We need a place to put this stuff sometimes. You know, when our children, my daughter came out 25 years ago, and there wasn't anybody for me to talk to. I didn't have any place to put my thoughts and feelings where I felt safe. And so if you start a group, you want people to feel safe, to say what they need to say, to feel what they need to feel. And we're all a little bit different. So you just want to provide a safe place, and you want that to be confident. You know, please don't take anything out of that room that you don't have permission to take. All right, now I'm starting on page 7. And I'm not really going to go through this. It's for facilitators. It's actually a great piece of work. I don't care what kind of group you're in. This toolkit provides some really good ideas for meetings and how meetings should be conducted. I think this goes for Bible studies or book clubs or whatever kind of a meeting that you have. Talks about facilitators, what they need to do, how to meet the meeting guidelines. It also goes on to talk about the next page, ground rules. I mean, and that's something that you may want to adopt in part or in whole for your group. Because once you may be the host for this support group, but once you get started, you need the buy-in of everybody. You need other people to feel ownership in this group. And so if you talk about what the ground rules are, what can you talk about? What can't you talk about? And just what the intent of that meeting is. And then, and all of this stuff is just great. The conversation about facilitators, the role of the discussion leader. Have we ever been in a role of in a discussion where we can't get somebody to talk at all, or two, they dominate the conversation and nobody else can get a word in edgewise. We've all been in those kinds of groups. So there's some great ideas here for how to get your discussion back on track, to help stop that person who overshares, and to help the person who undershares perhaps to feel like they're part of the group. I think that one of the other big things here, particularly when you're doing an LGBTQ group, is make sure you use inclusive language. I think that's really important, or to call people by the names that they want to be, the pronouns that they want to be called by. I mean, that helps people know that they've been seen. If they want to be called they and you keep calling them her, they'll turn off in a heartbeat and they won't be back. So it goes on through page 10 on potential problems, so it should discuss that. You can read that. I don't need to go over that with you. That's just some good information. It goes on until we get to talk still about the facilitator, how to handle that. And then I think it goes on to page 13, the tracks, which I think is one of the most important parts of this document on the toolkits. And it talks about different ways of being in your meeting or handling your meeting. And this first track is where you pick up different topics for reflection. You ask let's see, you can bring a professional in to talk in detail about a topic, or you can talk just within your group. I mean, I highlighted a couple of these conversation prompts, and I thought, how do you handle family members who are supporting and affirming and others who are not? Or how have you changed? I think that could be a great conversation since your child first came out. I know that when we first started our group in Kentucky, we had a plan. There were 6 of us, and we had a plan of how what we were going to do, and how our meeting was going to, how the follow-up meetings were going to look. We were meeting at a house, and we met with people, and we began with it. Just started with a discussion track. We didn't mean for it to happen, but people started sharing, which was really interesting to me because a lot of these people I'd known for a lot of years. I knew their children were gay, but they had never talked openly about their children. And so our meeting kind of evolved into just a discussion about our children. And then when we talked about what we were going to do next, because our group involved both straight and gay LGBTQ persons. And so our next meeting, what they wanted to do was play games. That was not what I expected or what I planned, but that's what they wanted to do. And so you may have an idea of what you want to do, but your group may change. And I thought one of the questions on this next page, it's number 14 on page 14, what has been the most pleasant surprise of learning your loved one's LGBTQ identity? I thought, man, we never talk about that. But that is one I would love to see us talk about. I thought that was how do we change and what's good about it? We tend to talk about what's the negative part of maybe our children or somebody we know being LGBTQ, but there's a lot of good about it too that comes through that. And so the second track is the media track, and it really is looking at it. These are lists of TED Talks that you might want to use. Also PRN videos. I'm going to put a plug in for PRN. We've done a lot of virtual porches in the past, and there's some really, really good conversations out there if any of you want to use some of those. So, and that's a way that you can run your group. You can use media tracks. TED Talks are a great way. Reading tracks. You can study a book. A book can be long-term. It could be a short-term. You could say, we're just going to get together for 6 weeks. We're going to read this book together. And that could be a good one too. I would recommend highly on that reading track number 3, Daring Adventures by Rachel Cornwell. It's a really interesting book about her journey with her son, who's trans. That's a great book. And also Janet Duke is here. Her book on parenting transgender children, a guide to keeping your family strong, is also an excellent book. It's kind of a primer on trans. I would recommend that highly. And a couple of these others are also good. So there's lots and lots of good books out there to read. And if you want to study them together, that's always a good way to go. And then the 4th track is just storytelling. Tell your stories. I love stories. I love people's stories. I just think that's the best way to get to know somebody. Not only do I benefit from it, but the person who's telling their story benefits. By telling your story, you're I don't know, there's just something that's refreshing and opening and just good about telling your story. And I think the other thing is having somebody listen to your story is also a good one. But people need to tell their stories. And I think for parents and allies of LGBTQ people, we can't always tell our story. It's not always safe. So you can't always tell it. And if you can tell it in a place where you feel really safe, it feels really, really good. And then the last one is action track. It's just getting out there and doing the work. It's being visible. It's being, our transgendered kids in our schools are not safe. I don't care what kind of stuff the school puts in place, they're still not safe totally. Our healthcare system, you all know what the healthcare system is like right now. How many states are there that are actually trying to put into place laws that limit the amount of health care that a trans child can have? I mean, it's debilitating. So there are ways to get involved in your states. There's PFLAG, Mama Bears, Free Mom Hugs, Pride events, all kinds of things where you might be able to get involved. I belong to the Free Mom Hugs here in Georgia. I haven't found a PFLAG yet where I'm living right now, but I will. But there are all kinds of ways that you can get involved. And then the last page is an appendix of where you can get information. Join us at Reconciling United Methodist Ministries. They do a wonderful job of lifting up and helping those LGBTQ persons and their families and allies. The Trevor Project, Strong Family Alliance, which is on Facebook, is also a great resource. They also have a Spanish, no, that's not, it's a great place to go. So, and look at our YouTube list for Parents Reconciling Virtual Porch is another great place to be. All right, that's the toolkit. I'm glad some of you have downloaded it already. It's easily downloaded from our website that you can go to and get it. So any questions? And if not, I'm going to ask a couple people on here who are here to talk about their experiences with a group. Any questions? I think Ophelia put it in the chat, the address.
Yeah, sure did.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Audrey. That was a really great overview.
All right. Janet, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to ask if you have any suggestions when you're first thinking about organizing a group, how to get the word out.
That's a wonderful question. When we started our group, we put together a list of parents who we knew had LGBTQ children. Now, we were also very cautious, Janet, in doing that because although we knew that their children were gay, and we knew that they knew, but they hadn't been talking about it. You know, they weren't broadcasting it in church. So we tried to be very, very discreet. You know, we told them we were starting this group. If they wanted to be part of it, we would love for them to be part of it. I mean, some of them were so new and tender that they did not want to be a part of it. But we wrote personal notes actually to people to ask them if they wanted to be part of the group. If your church is open and affirming, you could probably put it in the bulletin and ask for people to come. My church was not. So we had to be much more careful.
Now, one thing I would say is if you do publicize it with a flyer or a handout or something like that, is don't give the date, time, and location, but rather give a place where they can inquire. So you can kind of filter just to avoid any difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janet. That's a great idea. Thanks.
I think you can also, I often found talking to someone that had a gay child, if I had something to offer, I could say, if you have a friend in a similar situation, let me know. And sometimes they would be a connection for you to find someone one-on-one. So sometimes that's a good resource too.
Mm-hmm. And I think in a school system, I think sometimes people tend to find one another, or their children find one another.
And if there's a GSA club in your community, in your school, very often there's usually a teacher and a parent team that coordinate that. And they might be a good person to go to and say, I'm starting this for parents, and, would you help me get the word out?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Eric, I know you have a group in San Diego where you are. You want to tell us about your group and what you do and how it started? I know it's not just LGBTQ, it's also justice ministry, but. Okay, you're muted. You're still muted.
Now,
Yes, thank you.
yeah, we began. It was before the pandemic, I guess. BP and AP are the appropriate terms now, right? And it was we had a quick name for it, which has stuck. Olive Branch, which is ALL-LOVE branch. I thought a clever name from our choir director. And it was a mixed. It was a support group for the LGBTQ plus cause. Really, there were only two pairs of parents who had in the group who had gay kids, but it's kind of morphed into a social justice group, and which we have kind of spanned the. We've done studies on books. In fact, our next one is, I am sure, is going to be the book Incompatible that you talked about and that we're studying in this the group that you're leading right now. But it's been a very good, solid group. We have about 12 folks in it, and varying numbers week to week. So we, as it implies, we do it weekly, Wednesday nights, go about an hour and a half. We have a devotion portion, a section from the Bible that we read, and then go into discussion. And it kind of spans the topics. The rules that you mentioned all apply. Of confidentiality and what you kind of like Las Vegas, what happens here stays here. We don't, and one of the reasons I'm on today is that we really want to start a group that is focused on parents locally. I have touted the great things about PRN to lots of folks, but we don't have that small church group to per se to go to. And we've done lots of things. We regularly march in the San Diego Pride Parade, which I have heard is like the third largest in the nation, third or fifth, something like that. And that, by being present there, it brings out other churches to feel comfortable and to be in support. And it's a great experience. It was we were kind of nervous the first time we did it, but there was no reason to be nervous at all. And folks were so supportive. So it kind of morphs into many areas, but it's all about the health of our children and the safety of our children. So this is again, I applaud you, Audrey and Emily, and all those who worked on this toolkit. It's terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think he's very true. I think you'll find that if you're brave enough to get out in your context, wherever that is, maybe that's a school or a church, you're going to find like-minded people who want to get together. It just takes somebody stepping out, which is hard to do sometimes.
Now, Audrey, I think Jim Waugh has run a class for parents for years. Jim, how do you
Yes.
find them and recruit those people or get the word out to them?
Yeah, I was thinking about the group I've done. I've done my group. I started when I retired in 2013. So this will be my 14th year of offering. It's a little bit different format because I offer a short-term class called When Kids Come Out. And what I've mainly done is recruit through the network of, well, I started out just in the Columbus metro area. And because I live in the Columbus area, and when for the first up until COVID, we met in person, and so I would advertise through churches that were either reconciling or that would be LGBTQ plus friendly in the Columbus area. And then it becomes kind of a word of mouth thing. I would ask pastors. I would send a note out to pastors. I would ask them to put them in their bulletin, their newsletter, announcements, whatever. I would ask them to pass it on to Sunday school classes or to by just people they know, say, hey, here's something that might be helpful to you. And that's really the main way I have got people into the class, mainly is through the word of mouth and it's through someone saying, hey, here's a class and you would benefit from this. I have put it more recently in our, and I've expanded now since I'm doing it on Zoom to churches across our annual conference, really, that I think are more welcoming, not necessarily again reconciling. But if I know a pastor is more friendly and open to LGBTQ plus people, I will send that out and ask them to publicize it, and people can sign up. I have a sign up through a Google sign up thing for people who do that way. Otherwise, people reply to an email email address I have and so forth, and let me know they want to be part of the class. Now then I send them the Zoom link once they have indicated they want to be part of the class. And so I run that just for 4 weeks in the spring and the fall. And yeah, a lot of the things that is in that guide are really that's a wonderful guide. I think it really is. It has so many helpful kind of information in it. And again, as you said, Audrey, for any kind of group, really, but especially for these kind of groups. And again, I always start with stories, but the story is so powerful. And I only have about 4 or 5 people, maybe usually in a group, so I don't have like 10, 15 people show up. And I realize it takes a lot of courage for people just to kind of do that, either when I did it in person, to walk into a room and not know anybody there, really necessarily who's going to be there and what's going to be like exactly, or even coming into a Zoom meeting, and not knowing exactly who's going to be there and what's going to be like. It takes a lot. It really is a step for people, to do that. And so I just really appreciate that and affirm people when they do it, and just so glad and affirm them and their love for their child. And some are questioning because they still aren't sure themselves, maybe. I don't want to get into something with someone who is like, I have to convince them, that their child is okay. But if they're questioning or they're, what they've heard over the years from the Bible or from preachers or whatever they've read, we can talk about that. And that's what we spend a lot of time doing in the class, is kind of dealing with those kind of questions and issues in a safe kind of space. So yeah.
Jim, are you planning on a class this spring?
Yeah, I've got a class set up, got scheduled. I'm going to start promoting it here early next month, and it will begin on I do it on Wednesday evening for an hour and a half. I just say hour and a half is about all you can do in person or Zoom, I think. And so we start at 7 p.m. On Eastern time, and I'll do my first session on April 3rd, and plan to run it through the 24th of April. So,
is there any way we can put into chat how to get in touch with you, or can you tell us how, if anybody on the call wants to get in touch with you to do that?
sure. I'll put my email address in here, and
Okay.
if I can get that, go in here, and
Okay.
I'll be glad to hear from anybody. The other thing I have is I've developed over the years, from what I've either found because people ask me questions or because of things people have given me along the way. I have a pretty extensive toolkit I use and draw on that then for some of the stuff I use in my class. So I have that too. And some of it is a resource of books, and several of those books, and some of those books that are in this in the toolkit are books that I have on my list too. So yeah.
Okay, so you're willing to share that. Thank you, Jim. That would be a wonderful, wonderful resource. I do want to tell you one thing not to do. When we started our group in Kentucky, as I say, I lived in a very, very conservative place. There were 6 of us that decided that we wanted to start this group for parents and allies. And so we went in to talk to our pastor, who was about the age of, we were all about of a certain age, and he was the age of our children. And although he was in, he'd been in ministry for a long time, he was coming into a church of a significance. I mean, we had a big church. But we didn't think about how, so the 6 of us went in to talk to him. He's the age of our son. There was 1 doctor, 2 psychologists, and 2 retired ministers. We intimidated the heck out of him. It was not a good choice to go in with 6 people. So don't do what we did. I mean, we didn't even think about how we had intimidated him. We were the age of his parents. So he did not respond well to us. That was not a good introduction. So there are some things not to do. Any other comments? Any of you? Any questions? I think we're going to end early today, a little bit. Yeah, that's not a problem. I know you all have things to do. I want to encourage you, though. If you're here today with us, it's because you've been thinking about wanting a group, a support group. And I can't tell you how important that support group is, because sometimes the world will tell you that you've done something wrong or your children are doing something wrong. But if you can find a support group, they'll tell you that you didn't do anything wrong. This is how God made your child, your sister, your mother, your father, whomever. This is God. And I think one of the questions, I brought it up before, that I want you all to think about, that we tend not to think about, is think about what's good. What's good since your child or your friend or your mother or your father came out? We forget that part of it, because there's a lot of good stuff that have happened since my daughter came out. She is probably, I admire her as much as anybody ever for what she's done and is doing. And part of that's because she's been picked on most of her life. And so it's made her who she is today. And I'm very proud of her. So think about what's good. And I appreciate you all being here today. Call Jim. He's a wonderful resource. Email him for either his class or his list of books and things to read. But anyway, I appreciate you all being here today. Take care.
Thank you, Audrey.